All right, so the first thing we're going to be learning is how to create a bruise. Now, as I've said before, reference photos are very important. Just to give you an idea, I have a medical app that I've pulled up with a fairly intense version of a bruise, but it is a good reference to see the colors and the tones and how it will relate to it. So you'll notice when you're working with a bruise, you see a lot of purple, you see a lot of red, you even see some yellow, you see some green. Now there are varying stages of a bruise. When you first get hit as a bruise, it's very important to know what stage you're in. The first hit for a bruise is always going to be a little bit more gentle, you won't see as much, but day 2, that's when you're going to see a lot more of the color come through. If it's day 3 on a bruise, you see even more from there. Day 4, 5, 6, and beyond is where it slowly starts to diminish from being heavy reds and purples and bruise tone to really moving into the kind of yellows and greens that you see. That's really where you see the healing process come in. So when you're designing a look, it's important to know what the timeline of the bruise is. Did it just happen? Have they had the bruise for a week? Have they had it for 2 weeks? That way you know how to appropriately plan what the bruise looks like. While you're looking for reference photos as well, you can go from there and say, this is a bruise that I'm looking for that's been done 2 days prior, and we need to make it look as real as possible. Now today we're joined by our friend Miles, who is here, and he's going to be our lovely model today. And I'm going to show you how to do a bruise with a few different techniques. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is learn how to make a bruise with cream makeup. First step number 1, as always, we're going to sanitize our hands. Make sure your hands are clean before you begin working on your actor. If they come in, make sure you check with them for allergies. Do you have any allergies that you're aware of? Anything to latex, silicone, red dye? Check and overcheck. Just make sure that you ask and have this conversation with your actor or model before you begin putting anything on them. So, also, what we want to do is we want to have a fairly clean base to the skin. Skin collects oils, they may have lotions, they may have creams all over the body that may affect how the makeup wears. So the first thing we're going to do is take a little bit of cleanser. In this case, I'm just taking a small spritz of alcohol, not the 99%, we want to go with the 70% for this for more gentle. And we're going to work about right in this area here, so I'm just going to give a light clean to the skin to make sure that there's no residual oils left over to interfere with our makeup. Now, working with our cream palettes here, we're going to work from here and we're going to take with our spatula and work right off of our palette. So, knowing that we have a bruise, the bruise I'm going to be doing to him is probably about a day 3 or 4 bruise, so we can see a ton of different color tone to it and where the placement would be appropriate. Colors we're going to see for that are definitely some reds. We're going to see some blues. And remember, there's going to be purple in here as well, which, as you know, with color theory, red and blue mixed together makes purple, so we're able to make our own purple tone that we really feel appropriate for the bruise. With that, we will also be grabbing some white and some black for shade adjustment. Make sure in between you're keeping your spatula clean before you go and dip back into the next colors. You don't want to end up mixing colors within the palette itself. Mixing should be done on the actual palette here. We'll also be taking a bit of yellow and a bit of green. To mix colors together, we're going to be working with a sponge when we actually apply the bruise, but to mix the colors, I'm going to use a brush. That way we are able to see the perfect tone. We can even test it and clean it off to see how it reacts to his skin tone, to see if it warms up to the color we like it. So to make a purple color, I'm going to start with a little bit of red and a little bit of blue. Now, things to keep in mind are, if you think of blood, blood has oxygen to it, which when you look at your veins are blue, but when it hits the air, it's red. Same concept. Red and blue together will help to make a very good looking blood tone. And when you get a bruise, That's essentially what's happening. The skin is actually the body's bringing the blood to the surface because there's been a trauma to it, so you have to create tones that would be as if there were blood bringing to the surface. Just going back in. Keep mixing amounts of blue and red together until you feel like you have an appropriate color. Now you can buy pre-made bruise wheels, is what they are called. You see them from many different companies. It is a pre-made mix of colors that are already made for bruise tone, but I find it more beneficial to learn how to make it from primary colors. That way you're able to visually see and understand better why you're creating and why you're using what you're using. It also helps you in the long run to be a better artist. You're able to think on your feet. Say, for example, you don't have the material, the bruise wheel with you, but you have this color palette with you, you're able to custom blend it. So once you're pretty happy with the tone that you have, which I'm fairly happy with this tone here, we have a beautiful purple that has a really good balance of red and blue to it. What we're gonna do is we're gonna put our brush down and we're gonna take one of these broken up sponges. So the first thing you wanna do is pick up a little bit of product on your brush. Don't take a lot. We're gonna layer everything. This is about being very delicate. We're not going to be focused a lot on heavy blending because it should look imperfect. It should be spotty and it should be placed all over. So don't worry about going in with a blending brush or really smoothing things together because that won't give you the most natural appearance. Now, the darkest part of the bruise is the point of impact. The point of impact, if we imagine that about around here, say he got punched right in the shoulder, sorry. Let's say about here. Point of impact is the darkest. You see how using this broken up sponge really gives you this broken up texture, and you can already see even that on itself could be a bruise at the end of the day. I'm sure you've all had, unfortunately, a bruise at some point in your life. As a good rule of thumb too, as an FX artist, take reference photos of your own injuries. That way you know and you can actually look at it and say, I remember when my bruise was fresh. Here's day 1 of my bruise. Here's day 2 of my bruise, day 3. So you can see the progression of it and understand the colors that change throughout time. So anytime you have, as strange as it sounds, anytime you have an injury that unfortunately happens to you, it is great reference to take photos of it in the healing stages for your own personal makeup reference. Now, I'm going to make a little bit of a green tone. To do this, I'm mixing green and a little bit of yellow together. And an important thing to note too is if you find this cream makeup to be a bit too thick, you can always thin it with a little bit of castor oil. You can take a little bit of castor oil, put this in here and thin it out a little bit so you have a bit of a thinner product to work with if you're finding that this is a little bit too thick. Of course, the thinner you make it, the more sheer the actual application of color will be, so you may not get as full of a look as you want it to be, which sometimes when you're making a bruise, in many occasions it is for a film set or a play or something that you really need it to look a little bit more over the top, so that way it doesn't get lost when the lights hit it and when different sets change. So now that we have a bit of a green tone, we can make a little bit more of a maroon tone from what we already made. So from the purple that we have, we don't want to go any darker than that. Remember, this is our darkest color within the bruise. But we do want a bit of a lighter tone. Think of a slight redness, an irritation more so than a hit. So mixing together red and white. Also add a little bit of yellow in here to give a slight idea of swelling. Maybe a touch of blue. These are all colors that you naturally find in the skin that will naturally come through when you get a bruise. So thinking of undertones of skin, how skin looks when it's been through trauma, that's how you will help to find the best colors. And of course, when in doubt, use your reference photo. You can always blend colors precisely from what you see there without having to do too much extra. So now, I'm going in with our sort of swollen irritation color. I'm going to use the same sponge because it will help to blend the colors together. Pick up a tiny bit more of the purple tone, and I'll be mixing it with a little bit of the lighter tone. And just lightly tap around. And again, too, think of how the injury happened. If it was a fist, it's probably a solo blow, and it's going to be fairly round, and it's going to kind of fade out from there. Now imagine he was hit with a pipe like that. It may go in a line. So think of the item that was used to create this injury, and that's how you'll decide what shape the bruise is actually going to be. Certainly a bruise will never be a perfect heart. It will never be a perfect circle or anything like that. It will always be imperfect. And that's what makes it look realistic, is making it imperfect, but there are slight guidelines to follow based on what the actual weapon or body part that was used to hit was. Now you'll notice it's very quick taps around, and everything is kind of working outward. So we started with our darker color in the center, and then we start fading out from there. So it all kind of goes one general layer, and then the next layer gets built from there out, the next layer is there out. Another color I'm mixing up slightly is going to be a slight orange tone. So to make orange, it's red and yellow together. You blend those two. And you don't need a lot of it. I would say the majority of the color that you need is going to be this deeper purple tone, and that's the most important one to really give the depth. And everything is about highlighting and shadowing. Now I like to make this sort of orangey yellow tone because it gives the appearance of the bruise being swollen and the area around the skin where it was hit having a bit of a swell to it. Now for this one, we're going to use a clean sponge. This one we're going to go in, same exact thing, tap a little bit. You want to get as even as an application of color as you can on here. That way it's not too heavy on one side versus the other. The thing you don't want to have happen is you don't want to scoop up a ton of product and then try to blend it out from there. Again, work in layers. Build everything up very thin and very sheer until you get to the point you like. At the end of the day, it's always easier to add to a look than to take away. If you put too much on, it's very difficult to remove that without removing all of the prior work that you've already done. So work in thin layers. If you have to mix more color to build more up, that's fine. It's better to do that than to put too much on. So now, with our more yellow, orange, swollen tone, I'm just going lightly on the outside. And then from there too, I'm going to go in with some straight yellow. So taking just the plain yellow color and filling in a little bit. You can see the dimension starts to pull in. And you start to get a little bit more of a natural appearance to it. While I'm on this sponge that has more of the warm yellow tone, I'm going to take a bit of the green that we mixed, and we don't need a lot of the green at this point because remember, the greens and yellows really start to pull through the more aged the bruise is and the further along in the healing process. Since we're kind of in the mid-range of a week at this point, there will be a little bit of green, but it's not going to be as prevalent as a bruise that's been a week or 2 weeks old at this point. So a little bit will give some realism, but too much will take it away from what you're looking for. So the green, same thing, lightly add the color in. And again, it's imperfect. It's not about perfection. And you'll see too, I started here, but we kind of pulled down here because maybe it was there and it kind of pulled that way. it's not always going to be in this exact area. However, it will sort of fade out in a slightly radial shape. Once you've researched a lot of images of bruises and you have a better idea and understanding of what they look like and how they heal, you'll be able to make a much more conscious decision of why you're placing the colors where you're placing them, as opposed to just guessing. So from this point, I'm fairly happy with the amount of yellow and the amount of green that we see in here. I like the amount of purple as well, but I do want to add just one more layer in here to give a little bit more depth and a little bit more color variation. And the color I'm going to be using is a little bit more of a pink tone. So from the pink tone we did earlier, it is in there, but I want to do a little bit more. So what I'm going to use is from another palette that we have. It's still a cream palette, but I'm going to take something that's about a good mix of this slate maroon and a little bit of this coral tone. These two colors together will make a really beautiful tone that will give us what we're looking for. Go ahead and mix these together. Keeping your paper towel on hand for quick cleanup and then easy toss is very good as well. Now, we didn't throw our sponge away yet. We're going back into our sponge that has the purple and the blue tone in there. Are you understanding a trend now? We're keeping each sponge for each variation in each group. That way we're not wasting too much product and we're not wasting too many sponges here. So with the sponge as well, just adding a tiny bit more and a few little specks. This gives a little bit more realism to it, and to me is kind of like the finishing touch. I'm mixing it with a little bit of our original purple just to give a bit more depth to this center area. And then we fade out from there. Now from there, we have a fairly realistic looking bruise. If you want this to stay all day long, through filming, through working, whatever it may be that you're doing, say it's for a haunted house and it's meant to last the entire day, what we want to do is take a little bit of our translucent powder to set it. Because it is a cream-based makeup, if you don't set this with a powder, it can and will rub off fairly easily with clothing, with just moving around. It will last through sweat a good bit, but we just want a little bit in here to make sure that it lasts. So I'm taking a little bit of our no color powder, which no color powder will not change the color of the makeup at all. All of this will do is set the makeup, that way it lasts all day long for you. And I'm taking it with a clean sponge, and all we're doing is lightly pressing in. Remember, we don't want to smooth and we don't want to rub around because it will ruin the appearance of the bruise. But what we're doing is setting the makeup here with a heavy layer of powder. And once it's set, we can go ahead and dust off the remainder of the powder. Okay, now that we're set here, what we can do is we can take a fluffy brush and lightly dust off. Now, this also mattifies the look a bit, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but skin has dimension, it has glow, it has a little bit of oil that it secretes. So the more matte it is, it will last longer, but it does take, for me anyways, a bit of the realism out of it. So a good way to bring the realism back in is to take a setting spray. This is the Final Seal setting spray. Close your eyes for me. Have your actor close their eyes, and I just like to hold my hand up, that way no excess spray goes into their face. And just give a couple sprays on top of there. Let it dry down. This will seal the makeup in, and also the spray will absorb a little bit of that excess surface powder, so it looks a little bit more real and it does not look as flat onto the skin. So from there, this is another method on top of the powder which will lock it in and it will hold it a bit longer for you. Now he's ready with this bruise to go out and freak out all his friends.